Welcome to the Calm Analytics channel. I'm Boris Tizenghausen. Today is April 22nd. The main news as of this minute: wipe your monitors with holy water and have an aspen steak ready just in case. Now I'll show you Putin's speech at the Service Awards. Take a look.
Вы знаете, о чем я сейчас подумал? Вот во время Великой Отечественной войны весь тыл работал ради фронта, ради наших солдат, ради наших защитников. Но не только делали танки, самолеты, пушки, снаряды. Ведь самые тяжелые месяцы Великой Отечественной войны, в морозные месяцы 1941-1942 года, вот как сейчас, дети, бабушки, женщины носочки вязали, отправляли на фронт посылки и подарки. А в Германии-то почему этого не делали? Их солдаты замерзали под Москвой до смерти, а никаких носочков из Германии не приходило.
This isn't artificial intelligence. This is a real speech by Putin. In his reality, children in Russia spend frosty winter evenings with their grandmothers knitting socks to send to the front. What utter nonsense. Nemtsov was right. Oh, how right he was. Maybe someone should finally turn on the internet for Putin, so he can see that what worries children in Russia most is that he might cut off their internet and block Roblox. Kids are worried about him cutting off Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. That's what worries children in Russia. But how could he know what's actually happening? In his reality, children are knitting socks for the occupiers with their grandmothers. How sick is he really? Maybe show him how grandmothers in Russia, instead of knitting socks, collect expired food from dumpsters near supermarkets. He's completely lost his mind. Look at this. What socks? What frosty evenings? Let me show you another video now. A video about those who will never need those socks in Russia again. The city of Blagoveshchensk, Amur region. Take a look. And under the video, there are hundreds of comments like these. There's no end to the graves. What is this all for? And another. It's like this in every city and region. In our Perm region, it's the same in every cemetery. Can you imagine the scale of Putin's disposal of Russians if this is just one cemetery in a single Russian city? And really, what is all of this for? There aren't enough children in Russia to weave even bast shoes, let alone socks, for all those disposed of. In other words, Putin's system offers Russians no future, no meaning, and no development. He offers them two roles: either you serve the war, or you will be devoured by this war. There is absolutely no clear goal that justifies these losses. There is no threat from which Russia is being saved right now. There is a war that Putin simply cannot get out of, because he hasn't achieved a single goal. And how do you get out without achieving at least one goal? To admit that he can't is terrifying and shameful. Then what was it all for? That's why Russians are being sent to the slaughter every day. The situation, for Russians to understand, the situation will not change tomorrow, in a month, or in a year. It is absolutely obvious. Putin has failed to take Donbass in 4 years of full-scale invasion, despite having a significant advantage at the start. And he still had his Black Sea Fleet back then. And let me remind you, Ukraine had neither drones nor missiles at the beginning. Now it does. He couldn't do it in 4 years. The 5th year has already begun. So why would he be able to in a year or two, especially since Ukraine has begun to seize the initiative? Where is the logic? Well, logic left the chat in the Russian Federation a long time ago. By the way, friends, don't forget to subscribe to this channel. We're fighting Putin's propaganda here, and you can do it right now. Subscribe. Meanwhile, the war, following the laws of the genre, has returned to where it started. The oil depot in Tuapse continues to burn. They cannot put it out. And if they do, Ukrainian drones will add more until it burns out completely. The residents of Tuapse have started to suspect something. That is, they've started recording videos. We didn't want this, we're just simple people, we're pawns. I came across a video of a lady from Russia who, addressing us Ukrainians, says, "You have children too, why are you so cruel? Well, you come to any frontline city in Ukraine and sit in a basement with the children. For the 5th year, Ukrainian children have been hiding from Russian bombs, missiles, and shaheds. But unfortunately, not all children manage to hide. So tell them, lady, tell the 3,000 Ukrainian families whose children died or were maimed by Russian missiles and drones. Though I think the real number is much higher because access to the occupied territories is closed. After the war, these horrific figures will be revealed. You have children too, they tell us from Tuapse. Now you remember? Why don't you remember the 20,000 children that Putin simply stole and took out of Ukraine? But so that Russians don't get bored and get a full taste of the action, here's news that, well, will likely change a lot in this war. A new record, a very important record for Ukraine. A Ukrainian pilot operated a drone while being practically abroad. This information is public. It was released by the drone manufacturer, which announced a new distance record, from which they managed to control the UAV. So the pilot was 2,000 kilometers away from the drone, and launching at this record distance became possible thanks to the latest Ukrainian technology, which is also our unique development. That is, they've already started the mass deployment of this technology. And this is no longer just a technical improvement. It's a change in the very architecture of war. First, it sharply reduces the enemy's ability to hunt our operators. If a pilot is sitting in a tree line or a basement a few kilometers from the front line, that's a high risk. But if they're in a protected room hundreds or thousands of kilometers away, then it's a completely different story. And Ukraine gets a chance, first of all, to preserve and sharply increase the number of trained operators. And the scale of the war becomes potentially mass networked. If before, a good pilot was a person physically tied to a specific section of the front, now it can be a distributed system. Simply put, the front is in the Donetsk region, for example, a part of the front, while the control center, training, duty, shifts, and reserves can be in other cities very far from the front, or even abroad. Well, one more important point. Specialists will probably immediately ask, what about those who physically equip the drone and launch it directly on the line of combat contact? And now this can be done with the help of unmanned ground systems, and this is already happening. Yes, maybe not on such a mass scale, but they are working on that too. Thus, both the pilots and those who equip the drones are removed from the zone of direct risk. If this element is also automated or robotized, then the system becomes not just remote, but truly distributed. And now this technology is already being scaled and deployed, and this will completely, I think, change the rules of the game. And in every episode, we have an important fundraiser for the defense forces of Ukraine. Today, we continue the fundraiser for the Freedom of Russia Legion, which is fighting for Ukraine. The fundraiser for the repair of damaged equipment and for the purchase of UAVs. Legion fighters are now fighting on practically all the hot fronts, and they are also fighting not only on the front, but also deep in the enemy's rear. They are causing very serious trouble for the Russians. The Legion commander Caesar has recorded an appeal to you. Please listen.
Дорогой Борис Тизенгаузен, уважаемые подписчики его канала, от имени бойцов Легиона Свобода России я хочу поблагодарить вас за всю ту помощь, которую вы нам не раз оказывали. Сейчас я снова обращаюсь к вам за помощью. Нам нужны средства на ремонт наших автомобилей, нам нужны средства на закупку БПЛА. Мы будем вам очень благодарны и в этот раз. Вместе с вами мы обязательно победим. Слава Украине! Свобода России!
Let's help the Legion. The donation link is in the description of this video. There's Mono and PayPal for those who want to help from abroad. And in every episode, I give you a special thank you from myself and from everyone you've already helped. Thank you so much. You guys are just incredible. Moving on to the Middle East, Trump has given Iran up to 5 days to return to peace talks. Axios reports this, citing its own sources. And the article says that Donald Trump, I quote, is providing Iran's warring factions a short window to unite around a single counterproposal, or strikes will resume. Trump's negotiators believe a deal is quite achievable, but in Tehran, there may simply not be one person who has the authority to say yes to everything. That is the supreme leader. Iran's new supreme leader, Mojtaba Khamenei, is almost never in contact. The Revolutionary Guard generals are effectively in control of the country. Civilian negotiators from Iran are in open conflict with them over strategy. The split, by the way, became obvious after the first round of talks in Islamabad, Pakistan, when it turned out that, as it happens, the Revolutionary Guard commander, General Ahmad Vahidi, and his deputies simply went and rejected most of what the Iranian diplomats had discussed, meaning, well, we don't want it that way. And last Friday, this conflict became public when Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi announced the opening of the Strait of Hormuz, and the Revolutionary Guard refused to implement this decision and, moreover, began public attacks on the minister. In short, Iran has not yet given a substantive response to the US proposal and has refused to confirm participation in the second round. The split, by the way, is probably partly a consequence of the fact that Ali Larijani was liquidated in March. He somehow maintained that shaky balance, but his successor, Mohammad Bagher Zolgadar, has basically proven to be ineffective. Well, in short, in Iran, they themselves can't figure out which proposals to accept and which not, what to agree to and what not. But Iran will hold the next round of talks in Islamabad as soon as the US lifts the blockade on Iranian ports. That's according to Iran's UN envoy, Iravani. But we don't know if this is the Guard's position or the position of someone else. So it's difficult right now to evaluate the statements coming from Iran. Meanwhile, Donald Trump says the Strait of Hormuz is under control. The Revolutionary Guard, meanwhile, shelled and seized 2 container ships that tried to pass through the Strait of Hormuz just this morning. They were attacked and seized by Iranian forces. This is a statement from the Revolutionary Guard. What it's really like, nobody knows. For now, there's no talk of any negotiations of a second or third round. And I came across another news story that's very, very typical for Russia. More than half of the elevators in Russia could become hazardous due to a lack of necessary repairs. Why did I pick this story? Because at first it's all about grandmas and kids knitting socks. But in Russia, it turns out that about 400,000 elevators, that's 55% of all those in operation, could become hazardous due to a lack of necessary maintenance. That's according to Sergei Kolunov, deputy chair of the State Duma Committee on Construction and Housing. While Putin talks about grandmas and kids knitting socks, the elevators for those very grandmas are going to stop working. Just think about it, 400,000 elevators. And tomorrow Putin will say that this was all part of the plan, all intentional. It's good for grandmas to walk up to the 10th or 12th floor. They'll be healthier and able to knit even more socks. And since Putin is talking nonsense, Medvedev had to jump in too. They've got some kind of swarm zombie intelligence going on in the Russian Federation. Medvedev issued a terrifying threat. Europeans should not expect active intervention from the United States in a hypothetical conflict between certain EU countries and Russia. That's how he started his post. So he decided on behalf of the United States instead of Donald Trump that the US won't get involved. But the whole quote is actually quite interesting. I'll read you the most important part of it. Will Article 5 of the Washington Treaty work, and will the states stand up for Europe if a conflict with Russia begins? This is not an idle question, considering that crazy European leaders are pushing the narrative of war with Russia, and France and Poland, as the current leaders of militaristic Russophobia, have even begun preparing for joint nuclear exercises. So, will the Americans step in for Europe in such a case? In my view, no, writes Medvedev. And it's not at all about Trump's critical attitude toward Europeans, or even the current conflict with Iran, which is consuming all of the US's resources. Washington simply doesn't need Europe and doesn't feel sorry for it at all. After all, it's that annoying and harmful distant relative who's used to gorging themselves at the master's table, Medvedev wrote. Once again, I'm convinced that Medvedev's speechwriter is just a saboteur or some kind of spy. That last line, it's literally describing Medvedev himself. Let me repeat it for you. That annoying and harmful distant relative who's used to gorging themselves at the master's table. I mean, they basically put a doghouse in the Kremlin courtyard for Medvedev just so he can churn out posts like this every now and then. This is how I imagine it looks. Putin, from some Kremlin window, tosses a bottle of Finlandia vodka into the bushes. Medvedev rushes out of his doghouse to go get it. On his way back, he brings an empty bottle and a finished post. Well, that's probably how it happens. Distant relative Medvedev, huh? And Medvedev concluded, of course, with a threat, not just any threat, but a nuclear one. Look at how well your military production facilities involved in the war against Russia are covered, how energy and transport are protected. Remember the recent events of the US-Iranian conflict. Finally, recount your arsenals, including, of course, the nuclear component, Medvedev wrote. Oh, how scary. Oh, how terrifying. The last time Medvedev threatened with nukes, Trump made him apologize. And in general, when Russia starts threatening with nukes, it means things are going very badly. The connection is already clear to everyone. The last trump card is being played. We've been through all this before. But threats from Medvedev are a genre of their own. Is there anyone in the world who takes threats from him seriously? Well, we have over 500,000 subscribers here on the main channel. Is there anyone at all who takes Medvedev's threats seriously? Write in the comments. And in the State Duma, they finally decided to implement an idea that had been in the air for a long time. The State Duma proposed creating a whitelist of Russians whose internet will not be cut off. Russians should be divided into verified and others with different levels of mobile internet access during restrictions. Such a proposal was submitted to Prime Minister Mikhail Mishustin by the first deputy chairman of the State Duma Control Committee, Dmitry Gusev. According to the deputy's idea, forced internet shutdowns should not affect those users whose phone numbers are linked to verified accounts on state services. Well, those who are loyal, who allow themselves to be wiretapped. Gusev called for such Russians to be automatically added to the white list. Welcome to digital apartheid. And I was just waiting for them to get to segregation based on loyalty. And this is far from the first proposal on this topic. Every time you think, well, it's impossible to hit rock bottom any further, but then Putin knocks from below and calls, come on, I'll show you, we can go even deeper. I think, well, probably soon in Russia, these loyal ones, who will be added to the white lists, will get some kind of badge. There will be cafes for the loyal, shops for the loyal, transport only for the loyal. Soon, it will be like in the famous movie. Russians especially loyal to Putin will receive pants of the right color as a gift. And you, take care of yourselves, take care of your loved ones. Subscribe to this channel, don't forget. And let's help the Legion. The link to the fundraiser is in the description of this video. Our help is very much needed by them. Have a peaceful day, everyone, and glory to Ukraine.